Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, a podcast and video series dedicated to helping us overcome the limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome that so many of us HR professionals face. Here are your hosts with over 45 years experience in HR and certified life coaches, Jen and Catherine. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. It is the day after Valentine's Day as I'm recording this, and I still have the old intro that has both Catherine and I as the host of Thrive and Shine HR. And as I was listening and watching that just now, I thought, oh, it's nice to kind of have that as kind of the memory, and yet I definitely need to get that updated soon with Catherine no longer being on the podcast as a regular, but hopefully coming on as a guest from time to time. I sure hope so. So welcome. I am Jen Trum. I am the host of Thrive and Shine HR, and I'm so happy you can be here today. Today is Saturday, February 15th, and today we're going to be talking about passion. We're going to be talking about love. We're going to be talking about how we can find our way to reigniting whatever passion that we really want to be feeling when it comes to our professional or even our personal lives, whatever it is that can help light a spark in us. So my goal today is to share with you guys 5 different trends or 5 different things that I've really seen happening out there in the world right now that really can help us, whether we're in HR, whatever profession we're in. I think there are different trends out there that when practiced, when put into practice on a regular basis, they can really make a huge difference, not only in the passion that you might be feeling in your own life, professionally and personally, but also how that kind of transfers onto others. The more that your fire is lit and you're really pursuing what lights you up, the more that inspires others. I've seen it over and over again. So my hope today is that you're going to walk away from this conversation with some ideas and some thoughts around how you might be able to light that fire a little bit more within yourself, which ultimately, as HR professionals or whatever you do, that can help transfer onto the people that we care about. So before we get going, I want to just talk a little bit about what Thrive and Shine HR is and where we plan to be going over this coming year. So with Catherine's departure as co-host of the podcast, that definitely, as when I came on a couple weeks ago, if you were listening to that episode, it's there was grief, and it's really hard to be able to say goodbye to something that you've built for so long. And so recalibrating is kind of what I've been doing the past couple weeks, which has been really nice to take a step back and say, okay, what do I really want this to be? What do I think it can be? And where do we want to start moving this podcast, and also, the communities that I have to be able to really help people as best we can with with all of the insanity that we see and hear around us. I really want to be able to provide an environment that talks about the things that really matters, and really focuses the attention back where I think it really belongs. Like, we can have so many different podcasts and so many different webcasts and everything else out there when it comes to the HR world about policies and are you ready for this and oh no about this, and like, it can go on and on and on in all the different ways that there is doom and gloom around HR. And yet for me and for Catherine, when we started this podcast, we're like, well, wait a second, let's do our best to shift that frame as much as we possibly can and turn it back on us. And I know that can be really hard to do for so many of us that are like, self-care, all of these things that are really hard to focus on. But that was our intention, to say, hey, if we can bring it back onto us, and as coaches ourselves and people who had been in HR for as long as we have, we really knew like this value at the core of being able to say, hey, yes, I know it's stressful, I know it's hard, I know it can be overwhelming, I know we're burnt out, and there are opportunities within each and every one of us to be able to shift so much in the way that we currently, many of us, are showing up and acting out and everything else when it comes to when things aren't going so well. So, that being the intention for the podcast has really kind of inspired me now in this new chapter with Catherine, moving on to really think about, okay, how can I continue to serve at the level that she and I started with. So I'm really excited about that, and you'll see some things coming out over the coming days and weeks just around how that can ultimately serve those that we who we are and also who we know can have such a potential for a major impact for those that we work with and the people and the cultures and organizations. So with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's episode. So what we want to talk about today are 5 ways that we can reignite our passion when it comes to our work and our lives. And how do we do that? If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling any of those things that's keeping you from really feeling kind of that fire that deep down we know we want to be feeling, you're not alone, first and foremost. And what's important to recognize, one of the things that I've learned quite a lot through both coaching and also through therapy is that in our lives, we're going to have these patterns that come up within us over and over again that are going to, when the circumstances of our lives kind of hit us in different ways, these patterns of responding cause us to fight, flight, or freeze, right? They cause us to freeze in our lives and maybe hold back and hide away. They might cause us to start venting out and just blah, and whatever else we might do with that. They might cause us to just run and say, forget this. Like, that's something that I know very, very well of. For anybody who's been on this journey with me for quite some time. I went from job to job to job for many, many years, not being able to truly hold a steady place. And over the years, I've realized there's a couple reasons why. One is that whenever things got tough, whenever the going starts to go tough, my brain immediately, there's like this checkout feature in my brain that when I start to like give up, that checkout feature feels so good. Just like, oh, thank God, I'm not going to worry about this much longer. I'm going to get my resume going and I'm going to get out of here as quickly as I can. Right. And so those programs that come up for us when we want to fight, flight, freeze, whatever that might be, is really, I think, one of the reasons why I love to do what I do, is helping us become aware of, helping us to see maybe some of those programs that we don't always see very clearly. And when it comes to roles that we have, and especially any type of roles that are service type roles where you're giving and giving and giving and giving of yourself, there has to be a way to balance that. And I think for many of us, we just haven't really learned the tools to do that. So let's get into the 5 trends that I think can really help you find what can light you up, which will ultimately help serve everybody around you. So number one, I came up on my list, is going to be an interesting one for many of you, but for many others who, especially who know me well, it's not going to be a surprise at all. And that's really the trend around AI. So over the past several months, year plus now, it's something that I've leaned into a little bit more and more around AI. And I've gone to a couple different conferences now, and I've really put myself into this learning curiosity mode around what AI really can do and how to use it in a way that's safe, how to use it in a way that like is not letting out information that's confidential. I think in the HR field that definitely can be something that can be concerning for many. And then most importantly, like, AI has this opportunity that I think is pretty mind blowing when it comes to the potential to co-create. So when it comes to the HR role and when it comes to like my life, where I've really noticed AI coming into some huge benefits for me is, how can I utilize this knowledge base to help me with X? how can I use this knowledge base to help me solve for Y? So it's really about being able to take the nuts and bolts of whatever the circumstances or situations are. Because one of the things that I've learned as a coach is as much as our brains, as your brain and as much as my brain is going to want to tell you whenever something happens, whenever a circumstance, whenever a situation arises in our life, that's the reason why we're stressed. That's the reason why we're overwhelmed. That's the reason why we're frustrated. And at the end of the day, the reality is the circumstances and the situations are neutral. And it's our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings, our attitudes, everything wound up within ourselves that then creates how we react and respond, right? And so by knowing that, by being aware of that, one of the things that I've really recognized the power that AI has been able to give me is being able to make that separation between understanding how my ego and how I can kind of get caught up in the story around maybe I'm the victim, or maybe I see, something else as the victim, and I'm kind of starting to carry a lot of weight in the circumstance itself, versus being able to pull that art, pull it art, being able to pull it out and compartmentalize it, and being able to say, hey, you know what, like this is a very neutral thing, and what I'm looking to be able to solve for here is how can I, as someone who does find that they can get caught up sometimes in the emotional energy around the circumstances and situations, how can I be able to neutralize that within myself, one, and then how can I approach this situation or circumstance in a way that's going to be the greatest possible benefit for all. And AI surprisingly has some amazing ways of being able to help you come to those answers. And so by being able to use that, I feel like it's given me this new sense of purpose when it comes to how I have an opportunity to serve, when it comes to whatever it is that I might be facing in my life. And so the more that I've been able to look at AI in that way, because I think one of the things that I've heard quite a lot of, and I've listened to when I went to a conference, is this worry that as emotional beings, right, as human beings are, we are filled with carrying a lot of baggage, a lot of stories, a lot of things that can be really tricky when it comes to something like AI, because AI is very neutral, right? It just has the data, it has the facts, it has the information, it's going to spit that back out. But when the humans come into play and you start co-creating with an AI type of tool, now you have a very interesting dynamic where if you're also bringing your emotional weight into it, if you're also bringing in your opinions and your perspectives and everything that's really not so much the true reality of what you're trying to solve for, now you're going to see where the risks of utilization of AI can be kind of tricky. So being able to do that work within yourself before utilizing AI is one of the superpowers that I've utilized multiple times, is being able to say, okay, before I go to Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever my tool of choice is going to be, before I do that, let's sit back for a second and let's really think about what I'm bringing to this request that I'm making to the tool, and then going through that methodically and thoughtfully, and pulling out anything that is weighted in any way, my own opinions, my own perspectives, my own perceptions, whatever that might look like. Pull that out, and then be able to put it into the tool in a way that really can help you find the best possible way forward that is not about you. And and that's where I feel like with AI, it's almost been an aha moment. It's like, oh my gosh, wow, if I can kind of pull myself out of the situation as best I possibly can, and then be able to put it into something that is endless in terms of data and information that it can help provide me, how can we find the best possible win-win in this situation. And I'm telling you right now, when it comes to being able to find the fire within us, the passion within us, these types of questions, when you pull out the weight that can be associated, has been epiphanies for me, because it really helps me look at situations, look at the circumstances, and be able to do so with a sense of neutrality that I don't think I really have ever had before. I mean, since getting certified as a coach in 2020 and over the course of the last several years, I definitely have been working through all the different ways. How can I make sure I'm emotionally regulated right now before I enter the situation? Like, there's a lot of ways that I think it's been working for me over the years. But AI now is like this whole other tool, with my brain only being so much, that can really capitalize on that co-creative potential. So, okay, so my number one on how to reignite our passion in HR and beyond is AI. Utilize it, utilize it intelligently, and you're really going to find its potential is going to be endless. All right, number two is putting on our own oxygen mask first. So when it comes to really recognizing how we can find our spark, how can we like revitalize what it was that I really loved about HR? What is it I really loved about life? What is it I really loved about, the creative process of building something, making something, designing something, putting something out there in the world that's really going to matter in some way, right? These are the things as human beings that we're meant to do. We are meant to be out there in the world giving and receiving to one another in a way that helps evolution. These are like my thoughts and beliefs when I start to get on a soapbox. And so with that true understanding of how we all have gifts within each and every one of us, how those gifts need to be shared in some way, and regardless of what that gift might be, there's so many different ways that we can find outlets to be able to do that. So I'm kind of going down this like rabbit hole about oh, this amazing opportunity that we have in this life, and yet so many of us, many of us, are hiding. We're holding back. We are withholding something that we know deeply could matter, that could impact in some way in this world. And we're not doing so because we're bad people, or we are we're doomed in some way. This happens because of natural human instinct, natural human programming, and we are programmed and designed to really have these two parts of ourselves, to have like this inner fire and hunger to want to make a difference, this inner fire and hunger to want to make an impact. And then we also have this inner terror about putting ourselves out there, about getting rejected, about failing, about not being good enough. Right? And so you have this duality as a human about what it really means to thrive, what it really means to be everything we possibly can be, to be all you can be. I have a brother that was in the army. But to be everything that you can possibly be, first requires us to get out of our own way. And actually, I'm going to go back a little bit, because it first requires us to really be aware of the truth, to really be aware of what it is within ourselves that might be holding us back. And so the oxygen mask analogy is the idea that if you were ever to go on a flight and you were to go on a plane and something were to happen and you had littles with you or you had family with you, the idea is, in order to really be able to help others in a situation when it really matters, you need to first make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you are safe. And so the idea of putting that oxygen mask on as it comes down, grabbing that, getting it on your face, so then that way you can regulate, you can calm down, you can focus, and then you can take action. And so I think the same goes true. I don't think, I'm going to get back on that soapbox now. I don't think, I absolutely know without a shadow of a doubt that, we have so much programming within every single one of us, and each and every one of us are different in terms of what the programming is for you, what programming is for me, and and how that's going to flow and roll for every one of us. However, what I can tell you is if there is a shred of something within you that really knows that there is something more, that you could be more, that you could do more, that there's like this desire to want to, to thrive and have, something shared within you, then, that's really what that's really what this is the opportunity to recognize that if you are going to be able to find a way to become the best of yourself, you have to first be able to deeply check in with yourself around how you take care of yourself and whether or not your cup is full, whether or not, you're able to keep that sense of regulated full ishness. Doesn't have to be, overflowing all the time by any means, but a recognition of the awareness that within ourselves we are within control. We have that control within ourselves when we're recognizing that perhaps we're not, you know, um, as full as we'd like to be. What can we do to pull back? What can we do to recalibrate, if you will, so that then when we are going into those endeavors, when we're putting ourselves out there in these ways in our lives that are really like, hey world, that it's coming from a place of groundedness. And I think so often when we're not fully like taking care of ourselves, when we're really outside of regulation when it comes to self-care, and then we're trying to pour out on others, we're trying to do all of these things to keep up with the Joneses, or do whatever we need to do in this world, and yet internally we are struggling really bad. We're not rested, we're not clear-minded, we're overwhelmed, there's a lot of worry and doubt and anxiety going on in our minds. And so that, I think, is really the cue for being able to move towards living a more purposeful and passionate life and joyful life. It has to start with recognizing it is impossible to be at a high, or to be happy or joyful or whatever we hope and wish and desire in our lives to be able to have all the time. That is not a possibility. And so the quicker that we can get to an acceptance around the fact that every single one of us are on a journey that's going to have ups and it's going to have downs. And we have an opportunity to shift perspective. Absolutely. At any time, we have an opportunity to shift perspective, but we're not going to be in control of those circumstances that are going to really shake us up. Energetically, physically, and every other way, those circumstances are going to shake us up. But again, in going back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about AI, if you recognize that those circumstances and situations in our lives are neutral, that they're not necessarily loaded with anything until we place that on them, then you have that opportunity to really be able to slow yourself down when you start to feel like that. When something does happen, right? If you get T-boned, you get hit with something hard, and now the first thing that we go to is spinning out, right? Does that sound familiar? Kind of the spinning out of, oh no, am I gonna... And so the goal of really being able to live a more purposeful and joyful life is figuring out how to put a pin in that spin. Really becoming, practicing, really starting to practice that moment in our lives when that happens, because it happens a lot, right? Someone cuts you off, someone is chewing loudly. Like, there are 9 billion different reasons that we might get triggered. And the key that I think that I want to be able to impart on anybody who, listens or watches the program is the ability to be able to pause and become self-aware before we act and before we respond. And really then becoming intentional around the actions and behaviors that we want to take that are going to serve the greater intention of what we're hoping for in our lives, in our workplaces. And that's where I've had to, for myself, I've had to completely shift my brain around that and completely start to recognize that those are the moments that nobody else is in control over except for me. Nobody's going to know the triggers. Nobody's going to know the past things that are now causing me to think, I gotta put my armor up. You're now defending me. I now need to kind of find some way to push back. So all of those like instant reaction type of things, those are the indicators that it might be a really good opportunity to pause. And so I think, for each of you out there, and for anyone who is, who struggles with sometimes getting caught up in the emotional spin when things happen, when life starts life in, right? Like what are the go-tos, and what does that look like to start circumventing that and start doing that on a regular basis. And so when Catherine and I were hosting the podcast together, we would talk about almost every week the power of coaching. Almost every single episode had something within it where we said, oh, it really helps to get clear about what we're thinking about here. Are we starting to spin out in doubts and misbeliefs and anxieties? Are we having something to contribute ourselves to why this is not moving forward? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. So coaching is definitely something that, I recommend so highly when it comes to getting clarity around what's going on in your brain versus being able to really see the truth of what's in front of us without adding on our own opinions and judgments and perceptions and ego. And that is a lot of work to do, and I think counseling can also help with that a lot of times they're kind of looking at our past and how sometimes our past traumas and our past issues might be coming into play, whereas coaching is going to be looking at you right here, right now. Where do you want to be? What do you want to be thinking and feeling? How do you want to be showing up in your life? And then where is that gap between where you are and where you want to be? And let's get on it. Let's start reestablishing our different thought patterns that are actually going to serve us. One of the things that has come up for me recently is situations where there is this pushback on HR for being HR, right? So the pushback on, well, I can't share that with you. I can't, I don't want to talk to you about that because you're HR. And, typically HR, we can't trust HR. They care more about the company than the people. Does that sound familiar? So I've been, bumping into that quite a bit lately, and really trying to navigate through not taking that personally, not finding a place where that's not really tough to internalize, where you have so much of yourself that you're putting in, trying to make sure that you do your best to be trustworthy across the board for employees and employer. But at the end of the day, there's so much that's outside of your control. You have no way to be able to really know how you can shift perspectives and perceptions of people. And the best that you can do is continue to just show up and be there and listen and engage. And so, with that, that's something that I continuously have to check in with my thoughts about, because just earlier this week when that happened and there was, somebody who was like, I can't trust you. I just can't trust you. It's your role, and I take that on, right? And try really hard to recognize that, oh yeah, it's not personal, right? Like this is just how they see and how they view the world, and I can just take that and I can move on. Yet not so fast, right? Deep within myself, without really recognizing, because this was like during an hour and a half meeting that I was in, where this came up during the meeting, where we were talking about how do we better build the bridge between HR, between the employees, between our union employees and managers, and HR is really in my organization how it falls. And oh my goodness, excuse me, how do you build those bridges, right? And how do those bridges, where do you start from them? And so when we're in this hour and a half meeting and it comes to light that, that's not something that they can get past. They do not feel comfortable or safe. And, HR is just a role that, is just something that, they struggle with feeling comfortable with. Right. And so here I am in this hour and a half meeting, hearing this in different ways repeatedly as we're talking about how to build bridges, and basically, hearing this one side of, this is how we feel. Deal with it, right? And here I am in my mind as a problem solver and somebody who always knows there's a potential to be able to kind of build something better, and yet not having the answers, not having the answers right away on what to do and how to do it. So there goes my head starting to spin out, right? Starting to kind of think, oh no, what are you going to do? This is, it must be something that you've done. You've been there 18, almost 19 months now. This must be something you can't, you're the problem. And yet this is almost, not almost, right? I mean, if we talk about, we've gone into different episodes before where we've said 80%, at least many times, is subconscious thinking. So we have programming and we have thoughts that repeat themselves all the time in our brains that is continuously on a loop. And many of the time, much of the time, I don't know where my my words are today. I'm like, many of the time, much of the time, it's subconscious. It's not part of our, intentional awareness. So here I was in that hour and a half meeting having this conversation about how untrustworthy my profession is. And without really recognizing it, my brain started to go into some of those self doubts, some of those worries, some of those self defeating self-defeating things that came up for me. And it wasn't until afterwards, it wasn't until I came back around later and was able to recognize, oh my goodness, like that spin out happens regardless of how many years I'm now been doing the work around trying to separate my thoughts and my feelings from the reality of the situation and circumstances. And even with that, things like that can happen, and I can immediately kind of revert back to this old way of thinking of not being good enough, not feeling good enough, being afraid of being rejected, and of failing, and all of those things. It kind of comes right back around again and again and again. And that's where the practice of having some form of, whether that is a partner for, a coach, therapist, accountability buddy, whatever that can look like for you, to be able to make sure it's getting out in some way. I think journaling is a great way to get so much out, but it only goes so far in terms of that reflecting back that another person can do that can really help you see yourself. And that's the part that can get pretty tough to do, but something that I really, really recommend for anybody out there in the world, and especially given my 24 years in HR, especially for us in HR. I think we need that reflection. We need that kind of back to us. Many of us don't have huge HR departments where we get that. We don't have, bosses or superiors that really understand what our roles are and how emotionally and physically and mentally draining it can be. So being able to have that reflection back is really one of the best ways I have found that can help myself get clarity around the thoughts and the spin that is keeping me stuck and keeping me from being able to move forward in a way that I really know deep down that I want to. Okay, so moving on, the next trend that I think is going to be so powerful when it comes to reigniting our own passion and purpose for HR is around employee experience. I think along with HR, or along with AI, the HR field has shifted dramatically in the past several years when it comes to employee experience, culture, everything has kind of shifted in a dynamic that is groundbreaking. And there are many, there's many different sides to how much different employers are embracing the idea of employer experience, the idea of the employees' voices, and being able to have more flexibility, and being able to have all the things that could come with, and seeing the separation between some organizations that really see that and are embracing that, and other organizations that are still really kind of fighting back on some of the old school theories and traditions of older style, business environments, and, everybody working in the office and having, certain structure. And so it'll be interesting, I think, over the next several years to really see how this fleshes out, and especially with the administration that we have right now, because there's a lot of change, right? So good, bad, yay, nay, doesn't matter. There's a lot of change that's coming our way. And the more that we can really be aware of how that impacts our employee experience, how that impacts the overall employee. I was going to try to think of a different word other than experience, and I'm like, screw it, experience. But the idea behind it is that more and more and more in psychological fields and organizational, psychology and all of that, more and more we are really recognizing that the organizations that have a true awareness around the experience an employee receives throughout their employment matters, right? How they feel, how they, whether they feel valued, whether or not they feel heard, whether or not they feel connected, do they feel belonging, right? These are all things that matters. And as much as organizations and as much as some of the voices out there want to say that feelings don't really matter, and we have to kind of put a line, and we have to make sure that HR stays very neutral, and doesn't get too much into the feelings and emotions of our employees. The reality is, as much as I can try to kind of do that for myself, humans are such emotional beings that if we do not tap into the power of how we feel and of what really kind of moves us to want to do more based on how we feel, we're missing one of the most incredible opportunities I think we have in the world, is really being able to kind of, again, I go back to building bridges, and it's something that I love to do and I do well. It's really being able to take these massive assets of these individuals who are making it happen at the organizations we work for, and then being able to build that bridge around what is it that they really need to be able to do that in the most effective way possible. And have we really been asking the right questions? Because I think so often in the business world, it's been the one size fits all. It's off the shelf. It's this for everybody or it's for nobody, right? And I think where we are moving to in the age of AI and the age of, the electronic space and so many other different ways that you can customize and you can meet people where they're at. And I think that opportunity is still very much in its infancy when it comes to individual employees here, there, and everywhere. And there's so much I think that's left to really flesh out with it. But I think that there is a massive, massive potential to really be able to find the greatest possibility to see people flourish and thrive when we are building those bridges between what it is they really need and desire to help them flourish and thrive, and how we can provide that. And knowing without any doubt that that's going to vary from individual to lifestyle, and that is okay. And I think in the area of HR, that's a tricky thing to navigate. You don't want to seem preferential. You want to have all of these ways of fairness and equality and all of that. And I think that's tremendously important. But I also see over the course of the next few years programs that are going to be implemented that are going to allow that internal, individual, intrinsic, extrinsic motivation tie between themselves and organizations. And the way we'll be able to do that is with technology and with AI and with all of these different things that are up and coming. And so I get excited when I start thinking about that, because for me personally, it's a win-win. The more that you can see other people start to line up between what it is they really need that's going to help them flourish and thrive, the more that that really encourages me to want to do the same for myself. So again, it kind of like is this full circle thing that when I talk about take care of your own house, and that then will then give back to others. And the same goes to, when it comes to the employee experience of our organizations and places that we serve, is the more that we can figure out how to really meet people where they are to help them have that desire to want to thrive and flourish in their roles, the more that I think we're going to find something much, much closer to thriving and flourishing workplaces. Because that alignment is just not there for so many places, but you are seeing a little bit more and more. And I think as HR professionals, or for any professionals in different roles, the more that we can do to help serve in that process, to help kind of make those connections and those ties and those bridges, the more that I think, when it comes to, for me, I know that there's always like this underlying legacy desire for me. And so when I do these types of initiatives and big picture, you know, um, uh, pushes around how can we really find our way towards an environment that's going to be, you know, helping each individual flourish in their own individual way, that's what gets me excited. It really does. And I know that in many of our workplaces right now, we don't have all the answers, but the more that we start having the questions, I think the more that it brings up some really exciting things within myself. So I want to see it continue happening both in this community and other communities I belong in and out there in the world, because I think it's a really exciting place to be for workplaces and for HR and for employees. I really, really do. Even if there's, a lot of instability in terms of the landscape, I see a vision that's pretty exciting. Okay, so number four. So number four kind of lines with all of this really closely as well, and it has to do with networking and support. So being able to recognize that we can never do it all alone. We can never be the one who's all alone on an island thinking that we can make it happen, especially us HR ones out there. I'm talking to HR of ones out there, and really recognizing how important it is to not be alone, to not hold on to what could really help you and others by getting that out. I think in the HR field, it can be really tough sometimes to find that voice. And especially in the workplaces, if there's a lot of condensing of speaking up, right? That there's silos, or there's a lot of, we just don't talk, we're not sharing what's really going on here, right? That can be really, really tough for a lot of us to then say, well, then where do I start? Like, how do I really get something moving when I'm coming into a culture that's way far away from this idea of having this open, culture where everyone feels seen and heard. We are like miles away from that. And that for me is where I would say the coaching or counseling or something for yourself, and then also the support that you can get through networking and mentorship, or support groups, or there is something magical that happens when you align with others in a common cause. And when you do that on a regular basis, I'm a part of a daily group that shares gratitude and shares challenges that we're having. It's been a huge game changer for me, and I've seen many others do the same. And it starts with just the recognition within yourself of what's missing that could really help you feel more confident, more grounded, more clear headed, and more passionate about what you get to do each and every day. Right. And if there's misalignment in any of those, then it might be a really good opportunity to seek that support network, to really kind of find what is it I'm missing to help bring that spark back within myself. What ideas sharing can we do amongst ourselves? What kinds of ways can we really capitalize on one another and be able to build something even better than I thought was possible? These are all things that I think through networking, through local SHRM chapters, or I was just gonna say local, the SHRM. I don't know if you've seen yet, but SHRM is about to raise their rates again from 264 to 299, and I'm like, SHRM, you're killing me. So anyway, I mean, networking doesn't have to be SHRM. It can be so many other different places that we can go and be able to get the support from others who are in that similar boat. Because I think one of the most powerful things that we can ever do is be able to look onto others and be able to really know and recognize that we're not alone. There's something, when we think about, a sense of comfort and safety that we're trying to create and we're trying to build within our organizations, right? Like ideally, we want to create an environment where everyone feels safe and everyone feels comfortable. And what I'm here to share with you today is when it comes to my HR role, especially when I don't have a lot of outlets within my workplace, finding a support network where I can just be able to say that it's in a safe container has been one of the most disarming and comforting things that I've ever done in my career. And I'm really bummed that I didn't do it in the 23 years of HR before now. But now that I have that, I would never go back. I would never go any differently, is to have those individuals that you can reach out to who you get them, and can really have that reciprocated connecting and then support network is something that is just it's it's non-negotiable for me, along with the coaching or therapy that you might do. Both of those things, I would say, if anyone were to come to me and say, hey Jen, what are the things that you find to be non-negotiable when it comes to being able to truly thrive in my role? And I would say it would be the self-care things around really connecting with yourself and doing the work that you might need to do so you can be the best possible version of yourself, and also connecting with others so that you can do for them as and they can do for you. That gift of being able to kind of help on others and build on others is truly one of the things I love most about what I get to do and how I get to serve. Okay, last thing. So the fifth trend that I think is really pushing our envelope when it comes to HR and how we can reignite our passion and purpose for what we get to do is walking the walk, is really showing up in a way that is doing the work that's needed, that we are not holding on to our own biases, that we are really recognizing as much as we possibly can and really listening, really paying attention, really tuning in to how we can be that beacon of truth that I think HR is meant to be, that we can be that grounding sense of truth, to know that we are here to help kind of, again, build that bridge between the people who are here to make it happen and the organization that's here to help us do that. And how can we do so in a way that is collaborative and um, caring and kind and all of these ways to put it into something that truly matters. And I think for me and for you and for anyone else who is in the field, it's really about walking the walk. It's checking in with ourselves regularly on how we are making sure we are serving at our best. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially for those of us, and I know that was the case for me for many, many years, where I just was not aware. I was not fully aware of how unhealthy I was, how unhealthy I was physically, mentally, and emotionally, how I was holding on to a lot of, imposter syndrome and fears and worries and anxieties and these things that I just was not really paying attention to. And instead, I was just charging through, right? I was powering through each and every day and not actually paying attention to what was going on within. And that miss is something I will never do again, and something that I really want to make sure I impart on the listeners and viewers of this program, because that's where the real turning point comes. That's where the real reignition comes into play, is because you're willing to kind of go through that discomfort yourself and recognize how you might be holding yourself, or you might be holding the whole thing back in some way because of the anxieties or the discomfort that might come with it. Being able to kind of put that out in the open, shine a light on it, and push through that is going to be something that is going to be completely transformative in the way that you are as an HR professional, and it will, without a doubt, reignite something in you. Now, the trick to this is that when it comes to the places that we serve and the people that we are around and the people that we report to, we always we always want the very best for the situations that we are, putting ourselves into. And at the end of the day, we're not in control of how others might respond, how others might react, how that might be received, right? And so within the greatest of gut checking within ourselves of the intentions of what we're really trying to do and how we're really trying to be, and that reaction or that response or that receipt from others is causing us to put into question whether or not we're really valued, appreciated, accepted the way that we are, as we are, or if there are conditions and expectations that you have to be something other than who you're really trying to be authentically and genuinely. And when that happens, when that disconnect happens, that can be, that can be really tricky. And so that's where coming back again to your core and to your center and asking those questions and being very aware of what am I, what is it that I have control over in this situation, and being able to maybe get to that point after doing that work within yourself, that perhaps there's only so much you can do, so much you can give, and that it may be time to look at a different direction to move into. And that's, that's the hard part about change, right? That's the difficult part about changing ourselves. And I think why, if I'm being kind of theorizing a little bit, and I think there's studies on this as well, but I think why many times we delay or hold off making that change that deep down we know that we need to make, because ultimately when we get the reaction, the responses, the reception that we might get, and it's not going to be the way that it's not going to feel good, right? If it's not something that is positive, because ultimately a lot of times people would love for us to stay the way that we used to be, or in a way that helps them feel more comfortable or more safe or whatever. And so the more now that we're coming out and calling out the truth, or calling out what's real for us, the more that could shake things up. So I kind of went off on a tangent on that one, but walking the walk takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of bravery to be able to say, okay, I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to walk the walk in my truth and know that it's not going to be received great by all. And some people are going to come around and, it might take a little bit of time and we might just have to like grit it for a little bit and allow those reactions to settle down, because I think and I know, I mean, we've all been through situations before where there's been something that's changed about us or somebody else, and there's been that strong reaction at first, like, oh, no, you can't do that, you can't change that, you can't do. And then after a while, we calm down and everything's fine. So the question really is that if you are, on a path to do this work where you're going to want to, show up with more authenticity around what's real, even if it's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. Prepare for how that might be received, prepare for how others may react to that, and then adjust accordingly. Adjust your life, adjust how who you choose to be around, where you choose to be around accordingly. Because that is definitely one of the hard pills to swallow about change, but also once you can get past it and recognize, ooh, this is not working quite any, this is not working anymore, and you can get past it and actually then take that step, the liberation you get from that is second to none. So it's worth it. It can be a little bit tricky getting past that step. So I am so sorry. I've got this day after Valentine's Day clog in my throat for whatever reason, and so that happens sometimes, and especially when we're live, it's like, here you go. This is me right now. So, all right. Well, those were my 5 trends of where I feel like we in HR and beyond can reignite ourselves. Where can we reignite our passion and purpose? And going back through the list again, the first one is AI. Being intentional around what AI can really do to help serve you in your life, and really being able to recognize that we're all on this journey faced with circumstances and faced with situations that are outside of our control. And it's what we do about it. It's how we respond to it. It's how we react to it that really matters. And so the more that we can kind of get that support through a system that's really about breaking down the attitudes and the opinions and the beliefs and all of that, and really getting to the facts of what you've been presented with, the neutrality of what's been presented in your life, and then being able to use a tool like AI to be able to look at it from a neutral perspective. Give it a shot, my friends. Give it a shot. It's something that has really been huge for me. Huge. All right, number 2 was really recognizing our own house, right? Our own house being in order, and doing whatever work that we need to do to make sure that that house is in order. So what are the thoughts that come up for us repeatedly when we're presented with a situation that maybe feels a little bit of outside of our control, right? How do we end up responding to that? Does it cause us to spin out? Does it cause us to get frustrated and angry? Where do we see that showing up for us, and how can we start becoming more aware of how we really want to be showing up when those circumstances arise? Because they will. Right? Because they will. And so being intentional in advance on that is something that could be a massive, massive game changer for every single one of you out there. Number 3, employee experience. The employee's experience and your experience is all connected, right? It's all connected. And the more that within your role, if you have an opportunity to make a difference in something that can really matter for employees in the way that matters for each individual person, and is there a way to be able to build things and continue to kind of put out that flourishing of what employee experience can look like in a way that can help everybody feel like they can flourish and thrive. Number 4, networking and support. Finding those network groups, finding others who you really can help build off of. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful and beautiful ways that we grow and evolve is through the networking of one another. And then number 5, walking the walk. Not just thinking it, not just kind of cleaning it, but also doing it, putting it into action, actually taking the steps, being willing to kind of go out there and putting yourself out there in a way that is going to, it's going to shift things. I'm telling you, it's going to shift things. The more that I have found myself walking the walk and actually doing the work and then showing up and, kind of that process on and on and on. It's not perfect by any means, but over the years, it gets a little smoother and a little smoother. And especially when you can more quickly and more easily get to a place of neutrality when you've been triggered. Like that, more than anything, is the superpower that I'm still learning, but is something that I'm learning each and every day. Because when you talk about walking the walk and you've had something arise where it's like, I'm so frustrated, how do you really kind of in that moment gain that clarity so then you can bring that back to a place of equilibrium? And being able to do that, that walk in the moment is where I'm absolutely certain there's a few of you right now going, I have no freaking idea how I'll ever be able to do that. And I would say you're absolutely right. It absolutely is understandable that when we're first trying to kind of really shift how our brain responds to triggers, it's going to take some time. It really, really is. But the more that you practice it and the more that you put it into action, the more that you're going to see how it shows up in every single area of your life. So the wins on this are astronomical. All right. Well, with that, we are just over the hour. We've gone a little bit over an hour. I am so grateful for you taking the time with me today. I'd love for you to share in the comments if you have any ideas of what are we missing? What other trends? What other things that are out there that really can help reignite the passion and purpose for those of us in HR? Share your ideas, share your thoughts, and we are very excited coming up over the next several weeks to really see how Thrive and Shine HR is going to continue to thrive. And with that, we'll have another episode coming up in 2 weeks. And then coming up at the end of the month on the 28th of February is my first of my 6-part series called The Art of Conversation. And that is going to be super exciting partnership that I'm going to be doing that is all about how do we communicate better? How do we listen? How do we express? How do we receive? And how do we give better and in ways that are really going to be transformative to our relationships? So I'll share a link of that in the comments. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have an amazing day. And don't forget, every day is a new day to thrive and shine in HR. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.